I've been in a flow lately that just feels like, I know burnout and all the things we'll get into, but when we do work that is in alignment, it almost just like it's the opposite of burnout. It like expands our bandwidth.
Yep.
That's the kind of day I
Yep. Yep. I totally feel you. I've been in the exact same phase and much experience with burnout. And I really feel when you're going down a path that's not really aligning with your values, where you're not really feeling like it's moving to where you want to be going in terms of yourself,
Mm.
that's when the burnout really occurs, because you're kind of giving your energy to something that's not giving back. When you give your energy to stuff that replenishes and nourishes your soul, that tends to fill your cup up more and you have more to give.
100%. a hundred
Yeah.
percent.
And how cool the little bit of synchronicity in the course that I was doing this week, where it happened to be that David R. Hawkins and Eckhart Tolle were the two that were mentioned. I was like, no way.
And I have seen people bring them up together, but I'm surprised I don't see them get brought up together more often than I do to see them side by side on the same screen. It brought me a lot of joy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So what I might do is do like a little introduction and then we can like
Love.
jump off. Yep. Yeah, basically follow that trajectory of like a little bit of your backstory, what you've been through, how that's brought you to now, and then some of the topic discussion points that we had outlined. So
Yeah,
that
sounds great.
cool. So welcome to the Chi podcast, Dr. Jen from Grounded Now. I'm really excited to have you on here. It's always special to me when a meeting like this comes through energetic alignment. And since we connected, basically, I see number synchronicities. That tends to be a reflection and indicator when I'm on the right path. And there's been a lot of that happening. And as we just mentioned, the David R. Hawkins, Eckhart Tolle plan that we had to speak about, and then at presenting, there was a lot of energetic alignment. So I feel really good about this podcast and I welcome you to here.
I thank you so much for that. And I think we originally connected on Threads, right? It was
Yeah.
Threads before
Yeah.
Instagram. And I am finding Threads is such a profound place for that kind of connection. You are one of many connections like this that I just have kind of come out of nowhere for me. I've only been on Threads for a month and I'm really impressed by it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a breath of fresh air because one, being more text based and you can kind of train the algorithm in the way that you want it to
Mhm.
respond to you. Also,
Mhm.
I think people that are going on there are seeking a bit more of a positive environment, and then that's aligning with who you connect with too.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
So you're a business and health, I guess burnout coach is probably more accurate. Sorry, let me start that again. You're a business and burnout coach, and
Yes.
that's come from your background and experience in burnout and then business, of course. So
Yes.
what was your experience with burnout? How did that all begin?
May I jump back real quick to my teenage years, which is going to tie
Yeah.
into all of this, but it's not directly the burnout piece. Okay. So I grew up in upstate New York in the United States, and I experienced profound seasonal depression, which gave me this lens really early in life. This was about ages 12 to 17 of this shift that would come over me that I didn't understand. I didn't have context for it. I didn't have words for it. And everything around me was perceived differently. And then it would lift. My interactions with people, what I thought of people, what I thought of circumstances were radically changed by my internal state. And then when I was 15 in the summertime, which is the time that I felt, good, normal, whatever my version of normal was, I had this profound shift in sort of the other direction where I had this experience that lasted for about 6 weeks, very much what Eckhart Tolle describes, where the mental chatter, the swirling thoughts that just kind of are just always there, and honestly, most of the time not helping us very much. They just weren't there. And I was in this very grounded. Now I'm putting an adult context to a childhood experience, but I was in a place where external circumstances didn't affect me, and I was joyful. I could show up as what other people needed effortlessly. And when it faded, I didn't have context for it. I thought it might be this fading of childhood thinking or something like that. When I was 28, this is the burnout piece, I had become a dentist, which was the thing I thought I wanted to do. It's this blend of art and science. My dad's a dentist. He loves it. I was good at all of those things. It made sense. And I hated where I was at. I was externally successful and internally miserable. I had debilitating gut issues. We started trying to start a family a couple of years after that. I ended up experiencing a prolonged period of time of infertility, which resolved. We have 2 sons now. But at age 28, I drifted. I started to look inward. I just hit this wall where I was like, there's nothing external. I could hustle. I could set a goal to take all these courses and be this accomplished, whatever. I could set a goal to buy a bigger house, or all the things people around me were working for were utterly meaningless.
Mm.
So I turned within. And then my other experience with burnout. So, and of course, these things are a journey, right? Like I had a few years of not a lot of needle moving shifts, but there were some consistent changes that snowballed eventually. With 2020 being a big turning point for me. That was only, see, how old would I have been? I'm 38 now. So I was 34 then. So 28 to 34, did a lot of work, but 2020 was obviously a lot of challenging things for all of us. And the professional burnout was a new level. So boundaries, looking at beliefs around slowing down and how I tied my self-worth to that. There's a lot of points we can jump off to, but I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's such a journey that I really respect when someone goes deep into the, I guess, success realm and gets to a point that they've, basically got what looks like societal success, but then still feels that lack of fulfillment and seeks more. And it's really good that you were able to recognize the goalposts continuing to move and, continuing to try and seek that progression and external validation of increasing metrics of house, of figure, salary figure, or whatever it may be, wouldn't be a path to internal fulfillment. And yeah, because, like I've been a little bit on the other side where I was very uncertain of what I wanted to do in life, where I wouldn't say I reached a degree of societal success in too many metrics. Like I had a high paying job in the mines at one point, and, I too came to that realization that money isn't everything. And,
Right.
but I'd already been on the spiritual journey prior to that, but I felt that it would be beneficial to kind of go into at least getting to that point of making more money than I need to then go, because, if you haven't had that, then you can reject it, but without the option, I don't feel there's as much empowerment.
Yes. That makes
So
perfect sense to me and is very in alignment with the call I had with someone just a couple of hours ago. So,
yeah,
yeah.
Like, I think it's important to experience all these things in life. And, I could choose to do that again, but when I can choose not to, then I can actually do what I want to rather than say, oh, well, I have to do something else because I can't do that.
Yeah. Yes. 1,000% yes. It gives you, so yes. I wrote a post today while I was waiting for my son at the bus stop. He had a half day here. And that's how I create my content. It flows out of me when I am, I've got 10 minutes here and there, and I just like stream of consciousness make something. But anyway, the gist of it was that financial wealth for me is a vehicle. It's a conduit to all of the other things. It's a conduit to having, my day to day. I've had 3 distinct periods of time of work with complete free flowing time in between that. Monday, I wasn't at, so I'm still a dentist 2 days a week. I work 2 6-hour days, and that's Tuesday, Wednesday. Monday, I had 1 hour of work, and I did yoga in front of the fireplace.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's my wealth. Having one-on-one time with my husband while we're in this season of raising young children. We've done couples therapy for over a year and a half, and it was so necessary because the chaos of children will highlight all of your cracks. It'll highlight all, but like that's my wealth. The time and the bandwidth for those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Creating the ability to actually choose to do those things instead of being tied to working 5 days a week and then not having that freedom.
Yes.
Yeah. I totally resonate with that definition of wealth indeed. And if I may backtrack, how interesting, to have that contrasting experience in your teenage years that, having like seasonal depression and like this low state, and then having that cessation of thought that allowed you to go through such a, would have been a profound period.
Yes. it puzzled me for years, and I sort of stuffed it down in a way for years. Like, I really just I couldn't I didn't have context for it until I met somebody in 2018 who became a mentor for me. She's a therapist, she's a hypnotherapist, so it's a very, out of the construct of the normal box, type of thing, and she is the one who introduced me to Eckhart Tolle and David Hawkins, and I remember her saying to you, "That is real, and it can be experienced again, and I have experienced that too, and we will walk through this together," and she's, you know yeah.
So when you went through burnout, how did that manifest? What were you experiencing? What were the symptoms or
Um, Irritation was probably the biggest one, like, everything annoyed me. Every request in my brain, it was like, "What do you not get about, like, this situation? No." But I couldn't say no at the time, or at least I
Mm,
couldn't do it very well. Um, it was a feeling of obligation, it was feeling drained, it was feeling like you're just, like, trudging through mud. Like, your day is just this total grind. Most, if not all of my time was spent doing things I didn't wanna do, and these little
mm,
islands of getting to choose what I wanted to do were like it it becomes easier almost to numb than to, like, not that I was numbing with alcohol or anything like that, but, like, TV. I mean, like, it wasn't you just get into this cycle where you're, like, below the place where you can reasonably, like, sustain yourself, if that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, totally. Um, that definitely seems to be a common theme. The boundary setting, the self-worth, the ability to say no, feeling obligated to do things.
Yeah.
Because one might forgive themselves for thinking that burnout is purely physiological, where it's like, oh, I've put too much energy out and now I don't have enough to recover. But then when you start looking behind the scenes at the way someone's operating in their life, like it's often that there's actually a mindset that's causing them
Yeah.
to do things and the lack of alignment and yeah, all the things that you just mentioned.
So lack of alignment not only with, I have a lack of alignment with dentistry, and it took me a long time to see that. And I was not in a place where I could just like, I didn't have another thing established to just pitch dentistry to the side, etcetera, but I did end up changing jobs. So the learning to say no process for me, was very painful and very bumpy. I don't
Yeah.
know if you've ever experienced this, but, like, the amount of guilt or whatever that you feel or I think that I felt internally was the exact amount of ick that the other person felt with my no. And as
Yeah.
I've become comfortable with it, I can say, like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm in a place where I don't wanna add anything right now." That's my favorite go-to line because it's not like, "I can't this week," so they ask you again next week. It's like,
Mm.
I'm in a place where I don't wanna add anything right now." I appreciate that. So it's, the thank you on either end and the gentle I can't tell you how many people I've said that to without any internal anything that's negative, and they'll say, "My goodness, I'm not either. Thank you for helping me see that."
Yeah, yeah. You know what's so
Eh,
interesting? The more that you feel that your uh, truth or your expression or your no is going to hurt someone, the more you're, oh,
yes.
sorry. Oh, you know what? Like, it's no, it's going to no. And they're like, just rip the band aid. Like, people just want to
Yeah.
know like a clear answer either way. Like, if you're like, oh, actually, you know what? That doesn't work for me. I think it's out of alignment. Really respect your invitation, but it's, nah, it's not going to work for me. And people are like, okay, yeah, cool. Like,
Yeah.
most of the time, I
Yeah. 100%. And I also have this theory that, when we when we honor our authentic no's, um we're creating a win-win situation. That other person, I think we are trained to think in terms of win-lose, like, "Oh, this person needed my help," or this friend, like, whatever, so I said no to them and it hurts them. No, I think when we honor our no, it helps that other person either hit, like, maybe a mini rock bottom in whatever that subject is and figure something out better for themselves, or it helps them find a more aligned person for that thing, whereas let me give you a perfect example of my day today. I've become really aligned with saying no. I've been using the example of social plans. It comes up in a lot of different constructs, but I say no to things all the time gracefully that don't align. I have a very dear friend who went through something unexpectedly really hard earlier this week, and he's going to come over later. and just like I have the capacity for the emphatic yes.
Mm. That's huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think there's more being spoken around this, that when you say yes to something, you're also saying no to something else. And yeah, not saying yes to everything and then not being able to say, have time for the things that you want to do. I was going to
Mhm.
also say, um, on the topic of not being able to say no, that's something I've journeyed with hugely as well. And my theory is everyone's on a spectrum of self-focused to other focused. And say for someone typically on the other focused side of the spectrum, that's more like your empathic type of
Mhm.
person, because they're focusing on the other person's needs. And then on
Yes.
the other side of that, the self-focused, that's your more like narcissistic type of person who's focused on their needs. And so
Yes.
a self-focused person will easily be able to say that no, they're just like, no, that doesn't work for me. Yep. Hey, let's do this now. And that person's going to prioritize themselves all the time. Whereas the other focused person, they're going to be more like people pleasing and all of those type of attributes where they're like giving so much of themselves. And so I believe it's the other focused person's journey to actually focus more on themselves, taking the focus off others and then prioritizing their own needs and their own worth, where it's the self-focused person's journey to put the focus on others and be more empathetic and understanding and less focus on self.
Can I offer a paradigm shift on that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So that spectrum, I'm going to hold this up, and I know that this is going to be an audio thing people are listening to, but I'm going to describe this, and I can send you this link if you want. This is David Hawkins' Map of Consciousness.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm just going to verbally describe it real quick so that people can, look it up later. But on the bottom half of the scale, we have the egoic, lack-based emotional states: shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, pride, and then the tipping point of neutrality. And then the authentic self, the higher self, the positive emotional states: courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, love, joy, peace, and enlightenment. The spectrum you described, in my lens, exists on the lower half.
Yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
or place. When
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can elevate our own, like in sort of more layman's terms, it'd be elevating our baseline mood, doing our healing work, doing our nervous system regulation work. Well, it's not even layman's terms, but it's like more scientific terms. In spiritual terms, elevating our consciousness, we get to an and place. So
Mm.
I would say the people pleaser needs to look within and heal some stuff. The narcissist needs to look within and heal some stuff, elevate their consciousness and get to the and.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And may I add on to this as well? So a concept I've picked up and I've been running with and expanding is that of the nervous system. And obviously we've got two branches of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Well, of Eastern origin, there's a saying that the parasympathetic side of the system is the God flow system. And this got me thinking about how our authentic self versus a false self manifests
Mm-hmm.
when we're in either sympathetic or parasympathetic. So when you're in, a meditative, centered parasympathetic state and you've got a lot of well-being, that tends to be when your authentic self expresses, versus
Yes.
when you're in a stress state, high momentum like burnout, and you're going to be more reactive, more snappy, and your false self is going to come out. A lot of your internal wounding and defensiveness is going to be more brought to the surface. And what I've really thought about this, the way the physiological changes occur there. So in your parasympathetic state, all of your blood goes around the internal organs, and your blood's so linked to your awareness that that's situated, that your awareness within your inner being. So then when you go into a sympathetic state and the blood goes to the extremities in preparation for fight or flight from, ancestral tigers, etc., your
Etc.
awareness,
Yeah.
your blood and awareness go to the external. So you're in a superficial state. And so that awareness on the outside, you're out of your mind, you're out of your body. And that's where that reactiveness can come from, because you're literally like in this reactive
I
state.
love that. I'm going to tie that back into this and that thing you said about, what did you call it? The parasympathetic, the God flow.
Yeah, the God flow system. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, are you familiar with Dr. Wayne Dyer?
Yes.
He's
Yeah.
somebody
Not
else in this sort of like unified spiritual. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I've know like a little bit
A little
of
bit.
his
Yeah.
teachings. I haven't gone deep into it.
I haven't gone deep into it either. There's a free movie on YouTube called The Shift. And if I was to summarize, it's how to like recognize that this even exists if you're stuck here.
Mm.
And it's him showing up as himself. He is Dr. Wayne Dyer in the movie, interacting with fictional characters he meets at a hotel over the course of like 3 or 4 days and
Okay.
helping them just like have these real life, very subtle shifts. One's like a mom with 2 young kids and she's completely, like frazzled. One's a young, ambitious film director who's completely in like an ego lax state. And then the third one is an extraordinarily wealthy couple who has all of the money, but none of the real things.
Yeah.
But anyway, the God flow, he uses the term ego for the acronym Edge God Out. Have you ever heard that before?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Isn't that beautiful? So so we're in freeze, shutdown, apathy. We're in fight, flight. And of course, your listeners can't see what I'm pointing to, but in these red states, once they look up the map of consciousness, which is shame, guilt, apathy, grief, we're in nervous system shutdown. In the next level, the orange, fear, desire, anger, pride, we're in more that activated fight, flight, right?
Yep.
A lot of humans, a lot of adults don't actually access authentic rest and digest. We numb, we ruminate, we worry, we regret, we have all these addictive patterns. Even if it's not a physical addiction, we have all these patterns that keep us down here. The edge got out. I would argue that, so my sort of perception of spirituality is the more we're able to increase our baseline state, which of course has dips, but if we can dip consciously, it's completely different than dipping unconsciously. The less there's this like veil, and the more God, source, whatever you want to call it, like kind of shines through us. Jesus and the Buddha were people who were like completely free of whatever this egoic veil is that we have as humans. But I love that tie-in with the nervous system, because this is these states of courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason is where I would put the parasympathetic nervous system.
Totally agree. What a productive little flow of conversation there. I love that.
I love this.
Yeah,
I knew it was going to
absolutely.
be like this, and it's fun to see it evolving, because we both said, let's not plan too much. Let's just,
Yeah. That's the best way. Have a bit of intention and then just let it free flow from there. And obviously like some of the ways we were talking about, it can be a little bit granular and a little bit more like science-based. But I do like Eckhart Tolle's approach to things where it's, basically returning to your inner being, quietening the mind, and simplifying it in a way that sometimes I feel it's really, really beneficial to understand the scientific principles. So if you are caught in mind, you can actually realize why you're doing something. Because sometimes, let's say for someone really in mind dominance, trying to apply Eckhart Tolle's teachings, it's a big leap that can be done, but sometimes having the mind able to grasp onto why they want to do something can kind of help someone get into that.
Yes, I would agree with that entirely. You mean having a little bit more of the background from the physiological or science perspective can help bridge the gap?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Precisely.
All right, I'm going to show you another picture I have that's going to bridge some of that gap. You ready for it?
Yeah.
This is our unplanned like flow and segue. I love it.
Yeah.
Do you load these onto YouTube also? Is there a place where people will see this?
Yeah, I'll put it on YouTube and on Spotify with video as well. So
sweet. Okay. So I will still explain what I'm doing, but it's good to know that your audience will see it too. So this is a healthy nervous system, this blue line. We can get activated when the threat comes. We can return to a very grounded state in the absence of a threat, which is of course not how I had to do work to get there. Like most humans, most adults that I know are not just like naturally feeling great in the absence of a threat. And then dysregulation is when we go into these activated or shut down states too quickly, inappropriately, stay there too long. There's something, are you familiar with the idea of functional freeze?
I haven't heard that exact term, but is it right in me assuming that it's like it serves a purpose? For example, like if there was a threat too great, you'd shut down and it would serve a purpose, or?
So what you're describing is shutdown.
Yep.
Functional freeze is a prolonged blend of fight, flight, and freeze energy where you can still be very productive in your life, but you're doing it from a place of numbness and disconnectedness,
Right.
which is a recipe for burnout.
Yeah.
So I think I was in functional freeze for easily a decade of dental school, residency, the first few years of practice. I was incredibly disconnected from myself. I had been on a path of just like sort of like left brain, ego driven, like hit the next target. And I worked with people who were very much in that mindset. And it took me really peeling some layers back to get underneath it. But a lot of very successful people are very dysregulated. So that's where that enormously successful but unhappy or I don't love to use the word happy, but like not authentically joyful,
Mm.
thing comes from. So I'm going to talk about an analogy that I think helps, with some of that bridging the gap of, like you said, with Eckhart Tolle stuff. Picture our body like a pool. Have you heard this before? That's just stuffed with beach balls. And all of the beach balls are our old unprocessed stresses. These big red ones here are our big T traumas. We've all had them. And a big T trauma, yes, it can be abuse. Yes, it can be grief. Yes, it can be a car accident. It can be a thing a kid said to you on the playground when you were a certain age and it hit you to the core and the wrong way and you had no idea how to handle it.
Hmm.
So having that perspective, it can also be misattunement over time with caregivers. It can be a lot of different things. The small T traumas being these, like lack of boundaries, someone cutting off in traffic, like these small stresses in our day-to-day lives, a bill that comes up, whatever. In nervous system healing, this is, I think, getting better in the social media and wellness community. I did a lot of my learning from Irene Lyon, and I think she's the real deal. But a lot of people talk about like calming down and feel like that type of thing. That's to me, a very superficial lens. What we're trying to do is first expand the size of the pool. And by that, I mean anchor to a place of visceral safety within ourselves. And only from that place of visceral safety can we examine and start to remove some of these beach balls. And then the pool starts to have almost these little openings in the side. And all of a sudden, sometimes they just drift out on their own and it's kind of effortless. And from this place, which is not empty, mind you, we're never empty, but we have capacity to flow in our day-to-day life and handle new stresses.
That's an amazing visual and concept. I'm definitely going to borrow that. Where did they come from?
From Irene Lyons. She
Okay.
has
Yep.
her website is her name. It's irenelyon.com. This, I believe I got from, there's several free resources, but one of them is a 3-part healing trauma video series that just like, at the end of it, I felt like I had a new set of eyeballs for how I
Yeah.
looked at myself and the world around me. And then she also has a PDF about sequencing healing and how if you try to meditate and you're here, you're going to feel terrified and
Mm,
worse. Because
mm,
there are people who try to meditate and do even simple mindfulness things. And like, I've heard people to describe it as just like, they almost feel like their brain is screaming at them or it's so terrifying. It is productive once we're in more of this place. It is
mm.
out of sequence when we're here.
May I share a bit of my experience with this?
Yes.
So
Yes, please.
the lens through which I look at this as, or I used to, is basically our body and our mind being a like CPU, a processor, and all of the
Yes.
things we're exposed to are bits of information.
Hmm.
So let's say you're learning, for example, once you've reached as much data that you can intake bits of information, that in your nervous system reaches capacity, and then you've got to either meditate or sleep to then allow that to be processed through the nervous system and into the brain for storage. And with experiential based things, bits of data information, let's say someone cutting you off in traffic, there's like
Yep.
little micro kind of feelings and sensations that become pockets of information in the nervous system. And if you don't create space for yourself to integrate and process those bits of information, then it starts to take up your bandwidth, and then you become less able to do things because your capacity is reduced, which is, kind of a little bit of a different skew on the beach ball analogy. I've actually felt so when I've done yoga nidra. Are you familiar with
Mhm.
yoga nidra, NDSR?
No.
Cool,
I'm
cool.
familiar with I do a lot of yoga, I do Bikram, and I've done something called EMDR, which is like a reprocessing thing. But
Yep,
yeah, I'm not
yep.
familiar with what you're talking about, so fill me in.
Yeah, cool. This is an absolute game changer, in my opinion,
Okay.
for navigating burnout and regulating the nervous system. So essentially, yoga nidra, also referred to as yogic sleep, has been popularized by Andrew Huberman as, I think it's
Okay.
NSDR, like uh, non-sleep deep restorative something. Like, I'll insert the right acronym after. But
Love. Yeah.
basically, 15 to 20-minute guided meditation. So you lay down on your back, on the ground, or wherever. You stretch out, and then you really elongate your body. And
Mhm.
then the guided meditation will take you through head to toe, and you want to bring your full awareness. So almost like you're about to move your finger, but you're not. And you bring your full amount of consciousness to each body part that is being spoken to you. And there's a sequence that it will guide you through. And as you bring this, your awareness to each part of your body, I inevitably fall asleep within like 2 to 5 minutes, and I go into the most deep, relaxing state. And what's really interesting is when I've done this before, there's been times where I've had such releases of nervous system energy that I've literally involuntarily jerked my muscles and like nearly like kicked myself up. And to me, that's like the releasing of some of these beach balls that are actually just
Yes.
the nervous system is going into such a relaxed state that it's actually being released. And so, just quickly, one of my theories around burnout and reduced capacity is internalized stress. So, when you're
Mhm.
doing things, and like this can be outside of lack of alignment, this can be physiological. When you build up so much structural tension within your body, let's say you're doing something and you've reached high momentum, and then you've
Mhm.
reached critical point of structural tension, then that stress starts to get stored within, and this
Yes.
tension is keeping it trapped within.
Yes.
And now that's when it's a difficult point, because if you try and go to sleep, there's a slow releasing of that, but often that internalized stress actually disrupts your sleep. But that's where
Mhm.
meditation or a more restorative practice, like, like a sound bath or like massage or whatever it is that really gives you a little bit extra help to go into a deep state of relaxation, can release that internalized stress. And that has a lot more benefit for healing.
I love that. That gave me some little shifts just now too. I'm not familiar with that practice. Well, I've heard of non-sleep deep I'm familiar
Restoration.
with the broad concept, but not that level of it. Um, have you ever heard of a book called Psycho-Cybernetics?
I think I've heard of it
Ring bells?
actually.
No? Okay.
And that's about as far as I know
Quite
about
okay, and that's
it.
about how as far as I knew about what you just talked about. It was written by a plastic surgeon in the 1960s
Wow.
who noticed that some of his patients who he would, like, remove a mole off their face or help with a scar would have a profound psychological transformation that was immediate, and some wouldn't have it at all.
Mm.
And he thought, if this is happening with my surgery, sometimes and not other times, is there a way for me to have that effect on people without surgery? Like there's something else at play here. What is it? And how can I figure this out? And the book, I've read it several times, but it was before any of my nervous system knowledge. But what I would, I actually have a blog post. My early blog posts were largely written by ChatGPT, which it says that at the bottom, but with a very detailed prompt that I put in. And I said, please summarize psychocybernetics and tie it into our modern understanding of the nervous system. But the biggest finding of his was if he could get people into a place of deep relaxation. And from that place, which is, I talked about the place of safety a minute ago, expanding the pool is feeling safe, but profound relaxation from that point, self-worth could be transformative.
Mm. So what was sorry if I missed it there, what was the
Yes.
thing that was separating the profound realization between, did you,
So he, let me actually, I don't, I'm trying to remember, and it's not entirely. in my brain right now, but so
No,
some of
that's
his
fine.
patients,
Sorry to put you
yeah.
on the spot there.
No, you're good. You're good. Some of his patients had this profound transformation after surgery. Some didn't. So he's like, okay, well, what if there's something else at play that isn't the physical surgery? And what if I can find that thing psychologically and help people with that instead or in addition to? And profound relaxation was the biggest factor he found that helped people
Mm.
make the psychological shift without surgery. Maybe I'm phrasing
Yeah.
it a little bit better now.
Yeah,
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 but
yeah, yeah.
consistent and profound rest and relaxation was the biggest way, which also makes sense on a nervous system level because have you ever heard of a concept called story follows state?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So intrusive thoughts. Um, and intrusive, I don't always, yes, there can be intrusive thoughts that are like negative, scary, whatever, but we always have like well, unless you're like Eckhart Tolle or like I was for a few weeks when I was 15, we always have this like these thoughts that just kind of come up and come up and come up. If our body is in fight flight, our spiral of thoughts is there's danger lurking, there's more to get done than I could possibly get done. It's something frantic.
Mm.
I've recognized this with myself. I've seen like a car driving on the road and my child's in the front lawn and they're nowhere near each other. But my intrusive thought is, oh my gosh, what if, you know, but I know
Final
that now.
Fantasy
So like,
level
okay,
thoughts playing out.
I need to like, when our body is in freeze or shut down, our thoughts are defeated. I never noticed this more than I did this past fall because after I started to create content, I would feel good about it, feel great about it, feel very aligned with it. Saturday nights, I noticed a pattern where I was hard on myself. I'd think, gosh, I wonder if this landed this week. Gosh, it's like, what in the
Mm.
world? Our Saturdays for a while this fall were my hardest day of the week because my kids are young and they're loud and they have a lot of needs. And my body would go fight, flight, fight, 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 fight,
Mhm.
freeze, you know? And recognizing that pattern, okay, so I'm going to not have alcohol tonight. I'm going to not stay up late and watch TV. I'm going to take care of myself and drink water and go to bed early. And that was huge. When our
Yeah.
body is in rest digest, our thoughts are, I'm worthy, I'm enough. The world is an optimistic place. And yes, there's chaos, but yes, we're going to figure out a way through it.
Mm. And that's where I think, practices that can establish a baseline nervous system regulation, neurotransmitter support, um, yoga, meditation, all the good things. That's where
Mhm.
that can really help, just move the needle a little bit more in each area. And it seems when you're in a more regulated state, it's so much easier to keep that, sustained, almost like, a really literal or like a example. If you've got a room that you're trying to keep clean, if you let it
Mhm.
get to a, chaotic point, then it takes so much energy to overcome. But if you do a little bit each day, it's so much easier to keep in check.
I love that. It's so true. It's like a tipping point phenomenon.
Mm.
I know that is a thing. I know there's a Malcolm Gladwell book and now sequel about that phenomenon, and I'm not super familiar with it, but the gist, as far as I know, is in a variety of things. Let's say it's just awareness of consciousness or awareness of ego. Like there's this, slow growth, and then enough of the population has this awareness of this whatever that like everyone gets it
Yeah.
now
Like,
or something like that. Yeah.
yeah,
It's like
like
commonplace to, yeah,
Eckhart Tolle might say the flowering of consciousness, or
yeah.
another analogy, not necessarily by Eckhart, but, when there's a kindling. And actually, you did say this. When there's a fire and then someone else comes into contact and then they become ignited and then there's a rippling effect.
Yes.
How did you
Mhm.
come into contact or be familiar with Eckhart Tolle and the Power of Now, I think is where you started, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that hypnotherapist that I have been seeing now for years, I mean, I probably see her every other month now. There was periods of time where it was like weekly. Like I just need to strip back, help me. But early on, she told me about Eckhart Tolle, and I read The Power of Now, and that was my first like. It talks about having like new eyeballs to look at the world. That was one of those moments for me of like this experience that I had was real. It was profound. It is a thing that I can learn to live in more of the time and harness and teach people. And I think that is, I don't like to get too hung up on life purpose because I think our purpose is to connect with ourselves and let things flow from there, if that makes sense. But that is part of my purpose.
Mm.
So the Power of Now, that's how I got introduced to it. And then a couple of years ago, so this was, I think this was pretty soon after my peak burnout with COVID, and of course, politics in the United States have been very polarizing. I am in a very, I would say, black and white thinking type of area. I have had, because it's a very religious area, I have had to identify my own black and white thinking on the other end of that spectrum. But A New Earth, she had recommended, this is another Eckhart Tolle book she recommended to me around that time. It is now my all-time favorite book, and I have read it and reread it, and I keep it in my purse, and I open to a random page, and I brought it on vacation with me recently and reread most of it, because you hear different,
You
you
do.
know,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
So I came into contact with Eckhart Tolle and the Power of Now. Just happened to have a bunch of books on the list. Went, you know what? Today I'm going to read this one, or listen to it. Actually, I've never read it. I've only just listened to it. But it was happening just as I was preparing to go on a bit of a journey overseas. So I decided to go one way to Southeast Asia, sell everything that I could, and escape winter here and avoid my own burnout and ill health.
Yeah.
And as I started listening to it, it just hit me with such a deep level of profoundness that I was like, oh, like, when you stumble across truth so deep, and I just could not get enough. I listened to it at least 12 hours a day, up to 20 hours a day, including during my sleep for 3 months straight, where it got to the point that during my sleep, I was having Eckhart's voice filter into my dreams. And there was like an experience where there was a guy I went to school with that was like somewhat of a bully. And it was him, but Eckhart's voice coming through. And I was like, oh, maybe I got him wrong. He was really profound. And it was actually quite healing for me. And then, so I'm walking around Bali at the time, and I'd listened to it so much that I had Eckhart's voice in my kind of inner consciousness, just like, do you have any problems right now in this moment? And it was almost like a guided meditation that was occurring, because I literally listened to it probably 50 times over the course of 3 months, start to finish. And each time, to your point, something new would come up and I'd be like, I'd fade in and out of awareness, but then something, my consciousness would pick up that I could integrate. And yeah, that really set me up for a deep 8-month journey overseas. That was, that made a big difference for me. Like, I went and stayed with some Buddhist nuns for 2-3 weeks and joined in their full routine, shaved my head, and did the whole like morning through to evening routine. And I did a guided meditation for them at one point, and I used some of Eckhart's cues, and they all went really deep. And they're like, oh, wow, how did you do that? I'm like, not me, like taking from another teacher and sharing, like, but that's, for me, it was a bit of a vote of confidence of how effective his techniques are, that, they really cut through a lot of the thinking and go straight to the key, deeper part of
Yes.
oneself.
Like, I think he addresses this in both books, but so much of our disillusionment as humans comes from existing on what he calls, I think, the level of thought and form instead of beingness.
Yeah.
Like, where that ego, that veil is like, lighter or lifted or whatever, and like sources kind of just coming through us. I'm so drawn to people like him and Dr. David Hawkins, who have a universal paradigm for human beings. I am so, I don't want to use the word off-put set. I'm trying to like integrate and not be dualistic about it, but any religion, the more fundamentalist, so I think, Jesus and the Buddha were here and they were trying to teach us how to move up the scale of consciousness. I'm holding up this image again for people who are listening to this. Religion, the quote unquote God's you, at this bottom half of the scale is disdainful, condemning, vindictive, and despising. So the more fundamentalist any religion is, the more it's the like ego, like this is the sole truth. Other people are wrong. There's this punishment. There's this, and I'm in an area where this is very much people's reality, and they're completely blind to how that not only hurts other people, but hurts themselves. But I'm so drawn to these things like this that tie the human experience into something unified.
Yeah, I
It's
totally
humanizing, very
Exactly.
humanizing.
Yeah, because that right, wrong type of thinking, oh, well, my way is the correct way and therefore they're wrong. And then that, leads to the justification of committing, atrocities against such people. And then in doing so, like Eckhart says, create a hell in your pursuit of heaven. I'm
Yep.
paraphrasing.
No, that's exactly what he says. What he talks about in A New Earth is to go back to the tipping point concept, there will be this time in the near future in human history. I think he wrote this book somewhere between 2005 and 2015. It might have been like an updated version that came out about a decade ago. But he said there will be this, like, consciousness is rising. People are becoming more aware. There will be this time that a lot of people do their inner work or go on this journey at the same time. And as the collective consciousness rises, those stuck in ego will dig in harder and it'll cause chaos and confusion, but it will also create the conditions for mass delusion of ego. This collective consciousness that we've existed in up till now, I think there's something in the next decade that will profoundly shift in how we relate to each other as humans.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something we're definitely seeing now, that intensification of the ego, but
Yes.
then also the flowering of consciousness in certain pockets that's starting to spread. And have you ever heard of the law of one?
No.
So,
Enlighten me.
sure. So it's a set of channeled books that came from three people. One was a professor that was trying to contact extraterrestrials. So as a professor, he had a group of students, and I think 20 years they were trying to contact extraterrestrials. And they got to a point where they were getting a consistent kind of channel that gave them further instructions to increase their um, communications. And then they end up getting a woman who was of a religious background, but yeah, basically, so for her, she had to have like a Bible that made her feel comfortable, virgin chalice of water, rotated 30 degrees to north. And then they started to channel the entity Ra. And basically, that created these 5 books of the Law of One by Ra. And so it really goes into a lot of the concepts of service to others versus service to self. And
Mhm.
through being of service to others, 51% or more, you go through a graduation. And so it stipulates that every 10,000 years, our planetary cycle goes through an alignment of planets where during that time of 10,000 years, it's darkness. And then during the alignment, there's a 1 to 2,000 golden year where like there's like an evolution, where there's an opportunity for incarnated souls to graduate to the next level. Or if they're not yet at that point of service to others, to that 51%, then they repeat the density that they're going through. Now,
Mm.
whether there's, obviously critics could say, well, potentially they just made it up, as most channeled people can argue against, or, whatever it may be. I find it an interesting concept, this time of darkness and then alignment. And, we're coming into that age now where I think pretty much around this time, there's literally an alignment of planets. And
Yes.
what got me thinking about this though, so let's say certain people have got to that point of service to others orientation in their being, and then there's others that are set to repeat the same density and the lessons that would go through for another 10,000 years. I was like, how would that look? Because, religious people might be like, oh, well, that'll be the rapture. And then, but from what I would imagine it to be, both people would exist. It's not that they cease to exist, but maybe they just break into different streams of consciousness. So the people that are on third density that are repeating, they're still there doing the thing, but they're caught up in form. They're caught up in the matrix, so to
Mhm.
speak. And the
Mhm.
people that are
Mhm.
graduating to like another higher plane of existence, they can also interface with that, because you can still go down to that level, but they're also operating on a higher level with other people of like-minded interest. And there's probably going to be some like different streaming and division of consciousness. So I'm kind of wondering if that's a little bit of what we're seeing now too.
I think it absolutely is. I'm not super familiar with that paradigm, but I have heard it. And I think it is very much in alignment with all of the things that I've come to learn and feel that I'm experiencing so far.
Yeah,
No,
because
I
it's
love that.
it's interesting, isn't it? When like I would say, our connection and this conversation is one of those higher faculties. Like you can feel the alignment, like all of these synchronicities that are occurring, and then the conversation that occurs is at such a high level. Um, yeah, it's really cool to experience and tap into that higher energy.
100%. 100%.
So I wanted to you to speak a little bit about how the journey of burnout and then, coming to this understanding and then what are you offering now and like,
Yes. Yes.
what
And that
is
is
your service to
morphing.
others?
I am actually in the process of trying to change my title on Instagram to something with the words inner work on it because burnout scratches the surface of what I love to do and what I do. I'm verified now on Instagram and you have to like end your subscription, change it and restart it. And I just haven't done that yet. But okay. So um my coaching has two branches. I'll get to that in a second. And I sometimes blend them together. But financial freedom has been this huge, huge, huge part in my life. My husband's European. He's from Northern Germany. We wanted to have the ability to s- maintain genuine relationships with his family. My family's still in upstate New York. They're 10 hours away. So we made the decision early on in our relationship to be debt free at a young age. I had almost $200,000 of student loans when I got out of school. We chose an area with it is a nice place to live with a low cost of living. And we did that
Mm.
intentionally. And we paid off our mortgage when we were 35. We had this goal. We stayed very, focused. And from that place, I cut back to 12 hours a week as a dentist, rested, really rested. And then this business has come from this place of stillness, if you will. It has been an overflow of creativity that I could no longer just have
Contain.
conversations with friends about. Yes.
Yep.
Started as a blog. The coaching evolved this summer. So I currently do one-on-one coaching. I have a 90-day program, and then I do 1 hour one-on-ones too. This will be evolving in about 6 weeks to like an initial thing being a course and the one-on-one being something that it can feed into. But right now it's a 90-day program. There is a inner work or burnout branch. There's a business branch. They both follow the same framework that I call ground, heal, thrive.
Mm.
If someone is seeking out the inner work type of stuff with me, we spend most of that time in the ground, which is the making the pool bigger, finding that inner sense of safety, and the heal, which is some tools to take out the beach balls. And of course, if there is genuine trauma, I'm going to recommend specific forms of therapy, but this can be done in conjunction with therapy. Therapists can't be as direct, can't be as, coaching is different. They both have value. And then the thrive of that track is how to thrive in the existing life that you currently live. And that is boundaries. That is identifying what things in your world, whether it's your job, something with your relationship, how to function better in the container that you're in right now. The business track, the ground heel is going to be at the beginning and then woven throughout. So entrepreneurship has some dang hard moments. I've experienced them. I've had tech glitches. I've made things that ended up being deleted accidentally. Having the emotional and there is this prolonged period of unmet expectations sometimes
Mm.
for a long time, right?
Yep.
With income, with momentum, it is easy to get defeated and want to quit and all of those things. I have not had that this time around, but I had other entrepreneurial ventures in the past where I honestly ended up like depressed for periods of time because I didn't know how to regulate. So the business track is still the ground heel in the beginning, and then most of it is the thrive, which is the practical, tactical, all the things. I'm big on systems, efficiency, flow, ease, spending no more than 20 hours a week working. I'm a 12-hour-a-week dentist and a roughly 10-hour-a-week coach. At some point, I will not be a dentist.
Yeah.
I'm very, I've had so many requests this week to like, hey, want to network? I think we have a lot in common. And I say, thank you so much. I'll pass. If you'd like to seek coaching or have me on your podcast, let me know. I'm very, very, very intentional with how I spend my time. But yeah, 90-day program, 6 sessions every other week with email in between. It'll probably be Voxer soon, but it's email right now, or just a 1 hour one-on-one. My Instagram is grounded with Jen with periods in between. There's a link in bio. Anything else I can answer for you?
Yeah, no, that's great. And do you have a website as well, just in case
Yes.
your
Yes.
Instagram gets updated?
Yes, it's grounded-now.com. I've got a lot
Cool.
of writing there, and I can send you links after we get off the phone. But yeah,
I'll add
there's a
the links
lot of
in each of the
resources.
descriptions here. Yeah.
Perfect.
And I'm keeping an eye on
Okay.
time. We're
Awesome.
running right on schedule.
Awesome. I cannot tell you how much in my podcast interviews, I did my very first one in August of last year, and I've done about 2 a month since. they've just gotten better and better. Like I don't say yes to every opportunity, but like I have clear, like we barely interacted before we agreed to do this, and I just knew.
Yeah, yeah,
So I just wanted to say thank you. This has been beautiful. Stay in touch. If you ever want to
absolutely.
do this again, this is me in my zone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I really appreciate that you said yes to this, first of all. And yeah, some new things dropped in for me. So that's pretty cool because, yeah, it's good when you get to this point and things just kind of bounce off each other and you just get to expand. And I think this is going to be a cool episode for people to listen back to, including myself.
I agree. Me too.
Yeah.
I learned a lot, and I know we need to let you go, but thank you so much for this.
Yeah. No, thank you. Keen to stay connected and have a great rest of your day.
Sounds good.
All right. See ya, Jen.
Bye.